Before we get to the draft, let's take a look inside Fake Sports Dynasty's field. This is something I'm doing based on a request I got to see the inside of the stadium. I know there was some interest in part because we have the shortest porch in right field, 285, and so it makes for an interesting home run park. And now I'm going to show you in the 3D editor what things look like. This has been not easy to get the dimensions I originally had come up with for the ballpark to look okay in the 3D editor, which then is what you see when you watch a game or, engage and manage a team in the game. So from this view, you can see the short porch out in left field. And it did cause some problems trying to get things, to look good here. Like with this short porch, I can't get the warning track to line up correctly. I haven't figured out that just yet. If anybody's really good at the 3D editor in OOTP 24, hit me up in the comments. So that gives you a quick look inside the stadium. If there's something specific you want to see, just let me know in the comments, and I can try to make that happen in a future episode. But for now, we're going to move on to the 2028 first-year player draft, and we have to make a decision with our first-round pick. We're picking 21st overall, so we had a better season in 27, and with that comes this lower draft pick. So in the mock draft, there's a guy, a third baseman named Steve Young, a college player. He's already 23, who's interesting, and I'm certainly going to think about him. He's high up on the list of guys I might take here. Another player, and I've already run the draft, so through to our pick. So I know exactly who's still available out of these mock draft guys. One of them is Steve Young. Another guy who's very interesting is this guy here, Caleb McDaniel. He is a high school pitcher, just about 18 years old, huge upside. He has 6 pitches, potential ratings that are impressive for stuff, movement, and control, and on all his pitches. Extreme ground baller, not a high velocity guy, and he has good personality traits. He wants $8 million, and he's going to be extremely hard to sign, is what they tell us. I think we could get him, but we'd spend a large part of our draft budget on a guy who I think could end up being a great pitcher, but he also could end up not being a great pitcher. And we've seen this movie before. If you go back and look at our draft history, and this kind of gets into sort of what's become my philosophy on the draft. If you look at what we did back in 2025, we picked a high school pitcher then who doesn't have nearly the upside now that he did when we drafted him. Now, part of this is because I brought in a different scout after this season who isn't as high on him as the guy who was our scout when we drafted him. But he has nice personality traits too, and he still, I think, could be an effective pitcher for us. He's putting up good numbers. He's up in Double-A now. I wasn't overly impressed with his high A numbers, but I did bring him up. He was unhappy. He was pitching well enough, and I just wanted to see what he could do at Double-A. He's only 21, almost 22, so he still has some time to develop, but he's doing pretty well in Double-A. Anyway, his upside now is nothing like it was when we drafted him, and he was up in the 70s for his potential rating and had much higher potential everywhere in these categories, I believe. So He doesn't have nearly the number of pitches as McDaniel, who we're looking at here, but he's, a guy, an example of what can happen with a high school player. And it can be especially true with pitchers, I've found. Sometimes they can be, well, I mean, any high school player really, but, you just never know which way it's going to go. And I'm looking at some other guys potentially instead, but he's intriguing. Now, right now we have almost $13 million available in our draft budget, so 8 of that at least would go towards signing him. So let's look at some of the other options. So Bobby Cole is a high school player that my scouting director recommends. I don't think I'm going to take him. He has the highest potential of anybody left in the draft right now. I'm not crazy about these ratings defensively. And he has some nice offensive potential. But he's also a high school guy, and lots of things can happen. I do like his personality traits, though. And then, if we ask our scout to recommend, I always like to see what center fielders and shortstops they recommend, because there are often some talented guys there. So Jeremy Whitesnake Haynes, despite his excellent nickname, I don't think I'm going to take him. I'm concerned about some of these traits here. Great range, but not so great on the error rating or the arm. So I have some questions there. But looks good from a contact standpoint. Offensively, not great power, not great eye and discipline. Lots of speed. He's a ground ball hitter, so I'd rather have a line drive, or if he had some power, I'd be good with a fly ball guy. So don't think I'm going to take him. And then let's look at one other recommendation. Let's see who they want us to take at shortstop. Now, here's a guy who is in my top 2 or 3 of guys I might take. Carter Smith is a guy I had my eye on in last year's draft. He ended up getting picked by the Pirates, and then they couldn't sign him. So I had my eye on him for our pick in the 2nd or 3rd round, and he went before I could grab him. He is appealing. There's a nice balance here for his potential numbers, and he has pretty good defensive skills. Not excellent, but pretty good. And I'm thinking about him as more of a second baseman than anything else. His arm is at the bottom of where I'd want it to be for a third baseman, or even maybe for a shortstop. But with a shortstop, it's the range where I'm mostly focused, and I would have wanted that to be maybe a little higher. This is kind of the bottom end I'd want for a shortstop for range. Good enough at turning the double play, good enough in the error department. I see him more as a second baseman than a shortstop. And he also could be a decent outfielder. Not a gold glover, or who knows, he could be. But these numbers here tell me, he's not somebody I'm going to plan on to be an excellent corner outfielder, but I could use him there. So if he ends up with a big bat and I can't fit him in at maybe second base because of somebody else, if he's blocked there, I could get him some outfield experience in the minors or spring training. So he's also a college player now with a little bit of experience. He's still not like he still has a long ways to go with his current rating to reach his potential, but not as far as some of these high school guys we've been looking at. So he's definitely a guy to consider. And then I want to take a look at, and let's talk about money with him. So he is only demanding $1.6 million. So that's appealing because we get a talented guy with a good bit of upside who is closer to the majors than a high school player and at a bonus demand that's well below slot. So we could hang on to more of our $12.8 million for drafting some other guys. And that brings me to the guy we talked about at the beginning of this, who the mock draft has us taking. So Steve Young is a third baseman. Now, he's very interesting to me right now for several reasons. I'll start with this. So he only wants $470,000, and we could sign this guy. I don't see him not signing. He's not a guy who's gonna, he's not a high school player who's gonna tell us he's going to college. So there's a few things that jump out at me. Let's start with the defense. This arm for a third baseman is fantastic. These two numbers could be a little higher, but range at third base is not as big a concern for me as the guys up the middle. And error rating, I'm always focused on that. This is decent. It's good enough for a third baseman. I'd like that to be a little higher, ideally, but we'll see. And then just where else he could play, not a lot of places, because he has a great outfield arm. So you could say, let's put him in right field, where a guy with a cannon of an arm is always good. But these numbers aren't great. So I may try him in right field at some point in his minor league career, or maybe in spring training, just to see what that produces. But let's talk about his offensive abilities, and also let's talk about just where he is right now. So his potential rating, not as high as some of the other guys that we've been talking about, but almost up into the blue, almost up to the 70-plus range. But look at where he is already. This is what's really appealing to me about this guy. He has, great contact, not just potential, but his current rating is fantastic there. Same thing with avoid Ks. Great potential and already some really nice, a really nice current rating. Gap power is as high as they say it's going to go. Home run power isn't great, but pretty decent. And then, and from a third baseman, maybe you're looking for a little more power than this, but if he can hit between 275 and 3 something at third base on average, and with this avoid Ks, he could be a guy I'd be willing to sacrifice some power for. But my one concern offensively is this discipline rating. I am worried if this is as high as it goes that he could be a guy who strikes out a bit. So, in college, the last couple seasons, he struck out about 10% of the time, maybe a little less than that. So, and his average looks great, but not a lot of power. OPS plus is average. So he's somebody I'm really thinking about. He could come in and need almost no time in the minors. We don't need a third baseman right now with Arenado there. So, and I don't look at, how a guy fits into my current puzzle when I'm drafting him. I'm just thinking about what's the best asset I can acquire. So he, he could step in for Arenado when Arenado's contract is up in a couple more seasons. But in the meantime, he could start at I'd probably start him at, so I might go high A, but he quickly, if he's producing, he has the numbers here that you can put him right in the majors. I just don't know if I'd want to do that. But I could see him quickly being in Double A and a Triple A guy, all within this season potentially. Definitely by next season, he could come out of spring training with a job on the team. I could put him in on the Major League roster right now. I just don't need to, and I wouldn't really do that. I'd give him some minor league at-bats. But he's basically had his minor league career in college because he's already 23 and has a lot of experience there. So it's, for me right now, it's between Steve Young, McDaniel, the pitcher we talked about, high school pitcher with big upside, but who wants $8 million and is they're saying he's hard to sign. And Carter Smith, who is another college guy who isn't nearly overall where Steve Young is, has similar potential, but he's more balanced offensively if he does get there in these areas if his current rating climbs there. So, better eye and discipline than Steve Young, but you sacrifice something in contact and with his avoid Ks. So he may not hit for as high an average as Steve Young, but he might be a little more disciplined at the plate. And then he is a guy you could put in at second base who's going to be pretty good there. So he's, I'd say it almost would be a no-brainer, and I'd take Carter Smith over Steve Young if Carter Smith were showing me defensive ratings that said I could make him an everyday shortstop, but I don't think that's what he's going to be. So, and it's hard sometimes to find a good second baseman. So this guy could come in and be your second baseman for years. Steve Young could come in and be your third baseman for years. So that's where I am right now with this, and it is decision time. We're going with Carter Smith for a few reasons. It kind of came down to him versus Steve Young, and I like the fact that Carter Smith has more versatility defensively. He could be definitely a second baseman, maybe a shortstop. I could try him at third, but he doesn't have quite the arm strength I'd want there, or at shortstop really. But he could also be a corner outfielder. So, and I think he has a more balanced offensive potential than Steve Young. So we're going with that. And then let's see who's still available with our second round pick. We don't have a third round pick because we had to give it up because as compensation for signing Arenado in the offseason. So let's see what we have left to pick from here now with the 20th pick in the second round. Okay, so here's the guy the scouting director recommends, a pitcher who's been a closer in college. That control is not good. But otherwise, this guy looks like he's got some excellent stuff. He's fragile. Good personality traits, but I'm hoping we can find something better than this as an option. I have it sort of just to college players, but let's see what else is going on. We look at all players because there might be some high school players that have fallen. Maybe not. Nobody too exceptional is left. I am curious to see where some other guys went. So let's see. Right after we picked Carter Smith, Bobby Cole went. He was the guy our scout had recommended. He was a college pitcher I looked at. This guy right here, Hinosa. Becker was a guy I thought about. There's Caleb McDaniel at number 28 to Seattle. Here's Haynes, one of the guys they were talking about. Oh, Becker went to the Yankees. So, oh no, Becker went to the Yankees. But where is Steve Young? Did he not go until somewhere in the... Okay, he went to the Padres, 6th in the second round. All right. And so that brings us to our pick again here in the second round. So here's a look at what happened after that first pick. We took Smith in the first round. And then from there, we got a college pitcher in the next round. Not a really high ceiling here, though that could improve. But I like the fact that he already is, pretty established with his current rankings here. There was not a great deal to pick from when our pick came up in the second round in terms of like a sure pick. And so a lot of times when in doubt, you could go two directions. When in doubt, I sometimes go for a college player where I can see that they're already well on their way to reaching their potential. And this guy might exceed his potential. We'll see. So I liked him as a guy who has maybe a little room to grow here. His control, well, he doesn't have room to grow according to the current and potential ratings, but these can always move up some. But he still has some, that he can do in control, and has four pitches that all look decent, and the changeup looks real good. So we'll see what he can do for us. But I sometimes will go with like a college pitcher in this situation, or sometimes I'll take the gamble and go with a high school player, pitcher or bat, after I get past the first round. In the first round, I really, you know, kind of shy away from using my big pick on somebody who's, you know, it's a question of whether they're not going to reach their full potential because they're so young. So we went with Jack McKernan there in the second round, a pitcher. This next guy I'm really interested in. He is an outfielder who looks strong defensively, not huge range, like he's not a center fielder, but I think he could play some good corner outfield, definitely in left. I'd like his arm to be a little stronger to play right, but I'm really interested to see how he develops batting wise. So he's got definitely some potential here if he can get close to his ceiling on all those areas. We might have a pretty decent left or maybe right fielder here. So that is Mike Freshwater. He was our third round pick. Joel Looper was a first baseman we took. Yeah, again, I wasn't seeing lots of like sort of home run picks. Not sure about his adaptability, but I like his work ethic. And if he can get up to the 50s with his eventual rating, he might be a guy who can give you some at least a bat off the bench, or maybe he's a decent first baseman for you. We'll see. We'll see what can happen with some of these after he spent some time in the minors. He's already 22, but a couple of years from now, maybe this is a guy who is getting a look. And we'll look at one more. So this is Dave Jackson. I liked his potential as an outfielder, real high in the error department. High rating there, so that's good. Not a lot of range, not a great arm, but we'll see if he grows there at all. And another guy with like kind of a balanced batting ratings potential here. To maybe be not great in any categories, but good in all of them if he reaches the ceiling in these. So went with him in the sixth round, and nobody else really here. I'll do a couple more, but nobody else really here that jumped out at me as like, oh wait, I can't wait to see this guy, or I got like this steal in the 12th round or whatever. There was nobody really like that in this draft. Here's a catcher that I thought, he was one of the better catchers available in terms of a balance between ability and arm. Ideally, you get a guy who's higher in both of these, especially ability. But we'll see what he can do after some time in the minors. And Basham was a guy who I thought was interesting because he's intelligent, didn't have a lot of negatives, in the personality area, didn't have anything listed as low, and had some potentials that were really high here. He's not going to have a lot of power, obviously, but if he can be disciplined and have this avoid Ks, gap power has never been like a huge category for me, but I'll be interested to see what he does over time. And he's young. He's only 18, almost 19 years old. So we'll see what happens there. Here's a center fielder I liked for his defensive capabilities. I don't know how big of a bat he's going to be, but he has some speed and could be really good defensively. So and can play center field with this range. And be a guy who could come in and be like a fourth or fifth outfielder, mostly as a defensive replacement if he doesn't get these numbers up. But maybe he could come up and hold his own as a bench player and really give you some great defensive options in any outfield position. And then in the 10th round, we went with another outfielder. Again, I saw a lot of outfielders. I saw some, but I saw of all the opportunities out there, that's where I saw some of the more interesting either bats or guys defensively who had some room to grow. I didn't get a lot of pitchers this draft. I've been trying to grab good college pitchers, especially when I see them. Here's a shortstop, that I wasn't. I always try to avoid any negative personality ratings, but as you get further into the draft, it gets to be slim pickings in some of those areas. So, anyway, that's a shortstop that we grabbed. Trying to remember if there was a pitcher we got at all at some point. Here's a closer, which I my scout was recommending. They don't usually have a lot of stamina, and I don't always go for guys in this situation unless they look like they're going to be a dominant one. But my scout liked him, so I went ahead and did it because I thought, you know what, he's not going to be a dominant guy, but if he can hit the ceiling in some of these ratings, he might be, like a dependable middle relief guy. And, probably not for lots of innings, so he's probably not even an emergency starter, but we'll see what happens with him. He's still really young. Was there another pitcher? Yeah, there's a relief pitcher there we got. A relief pitcher there. Starting pitcher. So I started to see some guys who were, good picks a little further into the draft there for pitchers. There's another catcher we grabbed, and then another catcher. I saw a couple guys towards the end that look like interesting catchers, and if they have any defensive, ratings that are anywhere close to good or great, sometimes I grab those guys, stash them away in the minors, and see what happens with them, because I always like to have guys with strong defensive skills behind the plate, and then if they come around with the bat, that's fantastic. So we all are looking for the next Austin Hedges, really. That's what it's about. So that's it for the draft. And then let's talk about our record here at 55-36. We are in first place right now in the West, and I'll show you where we are overall in the league standings. So we have 55 wins. Minnesota's 2 wins better than us. The Yankees are 1 win better than us in the AL. And then we have a couple teams right behind us, the Mariners and the Astros. Right now we have a 4-game lead on the Mariners. We've been in first almost the entire season, but there was a brief period where they tied us, and then I think they were ahead by a game and a half, 2.5 games, something around that. But lately we have pulled ahead. We're in an 8-2 stretch right now, so that's helped. And then over in the NL, there are some teams that are right around where we are, like the Braves with 54 wins, the Mets with 53 wins. You've got the Cubs with 51, but then you have the Reds as the best team in baseball right now with 58 wins. So that's where we are right now in the standings. And then I just want to show you some things with the team, some highlights that have helped us to this 55-36 record. So we have some surprises with our pitching, I'd say. The main one being this guy right here, David Leal. I love this. He is a 38th round pick by the A's from 2019. So before I started this sim in OOTP 24, he was drafted by the A's and has just been working his way up through the minors. And really, if you look at all his stats here going back through the minors, he kind of just gradually moved up. Took a step back at one point to Double-A again, then came up to Triple-A, and I gave him his first shot in the majors in 2025. And he was up for 13 games. It was all in relief. He was fine. Nothing great, negative on the WAR there, but just by a tad. And his whip looks awesome. And he was a decent pitcher. In 26, he was down in the minors for the whole season, but he was used as a starter. All 32 of the games he pitched in were as a starter. He put up 2.9 WAR down there. And the next season in 27, he got a much longer look in the majors and started some games for us. And I knew coming into this season, based on the 15 starts he gave us last year and putting up almost 2 WAR at the majors, in addition to almost 2 down in AAA, I knew he was a guy who was going to be in the picture for us this year. But I wasn't positive about where. I thought he was going to be like our 4th starter, maybe our 5th starter, depending on how much we added in the offseason in free agency and based on where some of our prospects were. So once I decided to start some prospects down in AAA just to make sure they were ready, that kind of solidified his spot in the rotation. And he has been unbelievable this year. He started 18 games. Look at his ERA. It's below 2. The whip is 0.85. He's put up 2 WAR already in 18 games. That's more WAR. That's a higher WAR than he put up last year in 26 games in the majors. And he's just having a career year at 31 years old, and I'm excited for him. So we'll see what happens with him from here. He's making the league minimum, and so if he decides that this is the way he's going to pitch going forward, he'll remain an inexpensive option. But he's 31 already, so we'll see how long he can do this for. But he is a finesse pitcher, not a lot of velocity. He has great control, so this might be a guy who can remain effective for a number of years and, maybe not throw out his arm. So knock on wood. Let's see some of the other guys. So as I said in my earlier video, the last episode, some of the pitching prospects I ended up, starting down in the minors, but then I've had some injuries. And so Gunderson came up. He's been up, I think, and then went back down and then has come up again. And then he's been pretty solid, for me. He has a pitch limit and he doesn't, go too deep into the games. He has a pitch limit of 90. So we've been getting like anywhere between 4 and a little over 5 innings out of him. And like this last game he pitched, he was great. His walk totals are still a little high. And I think that's just going to come back to bite him until he gets that under control. He still has room to grow in the control department, and he really needs to. But I mean, some of these other ratings on his stuff and his movement are fantastic. And fastball, curveball, and sinker all look really strong. So I think that he is going to be definitely a solid pitcher for us. And, it just might take him a little while to grow in terms of his control and get some experience at the majors. A couple other guys he ended up bringing up. Emiliano is another one I talked about in spring training. He's come up and he's been pretty decent. Good enough, better than some of the other guys we had in the bullpen to start the season. I've moved a couple of guys out, sent them down to the minors, or gotten rid of 1 or 2. Barrett Kent was another pitching prospect that I talked about in an earlier video, and he's just recently come up, only pitched in a couple of games so far. And then I've had 1 or 2 guys from AAA come up but then go back down. One of them is Coro right here. He came up briefly and was up for 5 games and was decent and deserves another chance as soon as there's an opportunity. He's young still, but his ratings look solid, so I definitely want to get him back up again soon. Grant Holman is a guy who started the season in our rotation, and he was kind of like David Leal. He was like a 4th or 5th guy. If this rotation got real deep, he probably would have been pushed along relief. And back in 27, just a year ago, he had a really solid season. Put up almost 3 WAR, and had been good in 26 when he was in the majors with us too. But then this year he was really struggling. I know it was only 4 games, but I had guys I wanted to give a shot to, so he ended up getting pushed out. I can't remember. I might have had somebody coming off injured reserve, but there was a reason I needed to send somebody down. Maybe I was trying to get a prospect up who was really just lights out, but seems like it would have been an injury. So anyway, I sent him down, and he has not been great in 14 games down in AAA, so I'm not quite sure what's going to happen with him. Maybe we'll bring him up again if there's an injury or if somebody struggles, but otherwise I might give some of the prospects, like Coro, who's down there, a shot before I bring him up again. But he's a guy I don't think I'd get a lot for him in return, but he could also be somebody who comes back up when rosters expand. We'll see. See how he does at AAA between now and then. And then just looking at the lineups and what we've done there, sorted by WAR here. So, that's at the AAA level. We don't want that. So, what's going on here? Why are my something weird's happening? Oh, I see. I'm still down in AAA. That's why. All right, here we go. So, here's how things are looking at the majors in terms of the lineup. Gabriel Arias, who I've talked about before, he's a middle infielder for us. He's played second and short over the last few seasons. He's been great. Luis Rosales is delivering on the hype for him as a prospect. He's been just solid this season. Denzel Clark, a center fielder, is having a really good year. He was it last year he was down? Yeah, last year he was down a little bit from the previous season. And this year, though, his bat has been much better than it was either of those 2 seasons. You can count on him for defense all the time, but he's just been so much better with the bat. I mean, look at how much he struck out last year. So he still has lots of time to strike out more before the end of the season. But ZOPS Plus is great, and he's just putting up better numbers than he has in a while, even though he's remained a good player because of his glove and a decent bat. So Soderstrom he's catching right now because we have an injury to Christian Vasquez, but otherwise he was mostly DHing, and he has been solid offensively. His average is way up there this year. He's driving in runs at a faster clip than last season and just looks really good. So that's what he's doing. Okay, so Arenado was definitely slumping at one point, but has really picked it up. And even when he was slumping, he was still knocking in runs. So and playing a solid third base. So we'll see. I don't know if he has more left in him or if this is just who we have for the next couple of seasons. Brennan Davis is the outfielder I brought in. He had been mostly at AAA, got a little taste in the majors with Cleveland, I believe, and I brought him in one of the trades in the offseason, and he's been okay out there in right field. But, if I find somebody else, I've given a couple other guys a shot out there that are down in AAA now, and nobody's really taken advantage of it. But if I find a guy who comes in and wants to take the right field spot, it's very much still up for grabs. So Nico's been okay at second, not hitting very much. Trey Morgan is he's been okay. He's just a little below average here with the OPS. And he's still young, and we've got some time, and he plays good defense at first base, and I'm not super concerned about him right now, but he definitely has potential to be a better player offensively than this. And that's kind of it for the big offensive guys. The rest of the guys that are up right now coming off the bench, no big stories there, except some of them like Max Muncy deserved a shot with how he was playing at AAA, and he's been really good and limited at bats since coming up. Brady House is a guy who was doing really well down in AAA, and so I brought him up too to see if he could do the same thing. Here's our backup catcher right now, prospect of ours while Vasquez is out. And then the last guy who I might just have to kind of give up on here soon. I feel like his defensive numbers have dropped off a bit, and he's just not getting it done offensively, and I think it's time to give up on him. So he doesn't have any options left. I've had him in my system for a while. We've given him a shot. He had a real good season at AAA a while back, and then he came up, and at one point AI moved him down to AA, but whenever he's come up, he just hasn't gotten it done, or just there haven't been at-bats for him. Like, last season, he was okay, but there's weren't a lot of at-bats to be had. So I may move him out, and he's got some personality ratings that aren't ideal. So I'll show you real quick something at AAA I'm thinking about. So this guy right here, Henry Bolt, he's climbed the ladder and put up good numbers, and I think it's finally time to give him a chance. So he may be the guy I bring up and give a shot. There's nobody else down here who's not going to cover off the ball, but there's a guy I picked up on waivers because I thought his home run power number looked super interesting, and he's hit almost 20 home runs in 39 games down in AAA. He was up briefly for us and did not produce. So most of the other outfield prospects we have are still like a little ways away down in AA. And in the meantime, I might give Bolt a shot. And if O'Donnell produces at AAA like he has at some of the other levels for an extended period of time, I imagine he'll be coming up too. So, and I like his leadership potential. So he hasn't been killing it, but he's definitely a guy I've got my eye on. He may get a shot too. So if Bolt gets a shot and doesn't stick, I may go to him next, unless somebody's really moving up fast from AA. So I got a few guys down there to keep an eye on. So that's kind of it for this one. We head towards the trade deadline next. That's only 2-3 weeks away, and I have to think about who we want to acquire. If I want to go out and try to find another outfield bat that way, or a DH, because the DHs we've been using have been pretty weak to this point. But what that does, though, is when Vasquez comes back, it means, I need to move Soderstrom back to the DH. So I don't think I'm going to get somebody who, I guess I could get a DH who then could become a good bench bat. But what I think I'm more likely to do is go out and get an outfielder who can be a corner outfield bat in right field, where I definitely have, the potential to improve. And then could also DH. So I'll kind of poke around, see what's out there. And then other than that, I'm going to look around and see what pitching improvements we might be able to make. You can see where we are there, like every pitching category, and, down into defense as well. But all the pitching categories were in the top 5 or 6 in the rankings. We're doing really well there. Credit to our pitching coach. So I don't know. It still doesn't hurt to go out and get either another bullpen arm or a solid top 3 starting pitcher who you can put into your big 3 for the playoffs. But they're usually pricey. So I'll take a look around, and I'll update you guys sometime after the trade deadline on anything we do.